Second. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining. In this session, we have Varun from Coditas and we have Mohak from Langify who will be joining us. Before we start, there is a poll that should appear on your screen right now. If you could please quickly answer that. It's a single question poll. It helps us get a better context of who we are presenting to and what kind of topics to go deeper on. So if you could just quickly answer that, that'd be brilliant. I think most of us have already given it. Cool. So the results of the poll are that about 14% of people on this call have built something with generative AI. Another 29% have seen videos about it. 55% have either heard about it or used ChatGPT. Very interestingly, 0% have done a course on it, which I guess is very much in line with our college ethos. And everyone has heard about it, so that's very good. All right, cool guys. So let's start off with Varun. So Varun is a co-founder of Coditas. Varun, if you could just introduce yourself for the team, that'd be great.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Varun. I'm co-founder at Coditas. We are a user experience focused software services company based in Pune. I head the generative AI services at Coditas. I'm a software developer at heart. I love to build things. I always love tinkering with anything new that catches my attention. I don't have a lot of background in AI or machine learning as such, but with generative AI and LLMs, AI in general has become so accessible that people like me who don't have a lot of background in machine learning can do any kind of AI overall, right? And we'll probably see how we can talk about some of those things today. And I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences in integrating generative AI for all the apps we build at Coditas. And yeah, that's about it. That's about me.
Awesome, Varun. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks so much for sharing your experiences as well. So why don't we just kick off with you, right? So why don't you tell us what is possible and what is not possible today with AI?
Right. So I was telling this to you earlier also, Pratik. People think that generative AI right now is magic. People think anything is possible, right? They will say you can try this. ChatGPT to kar dega ye kind of a thing, right? But that's not always the case. What is possible? There's definitely a lot possible. One thing that we should always think about when we talk about generative AI is, it's not just content generation or, generative AI per se, right? It is an intelligent model and it can also understand natural language, right? So it's not just generating natural language, but also understanding natural language. And that in itself makes a lot of things possible for us. For example, one very simple thing that we do is, feature extraction from natural language. Right, that is something that something like OpenAI APIs or anything can very easily do for us, right? What else is possible? You can of course chat with any of the documentation you have. If you have a PDF, if you have a website, if you have lot of markdown files that is available as documentation that you have, you can just chat with that. There are ways to load it into your AI context or a chat context and then talk with those documentation kind of things. What's not possible? Asking it to build an entire complex enterprise application, that is not possible. Looking at a lot of YouTube videos, people think, "Arey, ye to ho jayega." It is possible. Believe me, I have tried. Right, it is not possible. It helps you up to a certain extent, but it still is not there yet. It cannot replace software developers. Ultimately, a software developer has to chime in, has to come in, has to fix things. if you use something like your there's this repo that recently came up called GPT Engineer. So if you use something like a GPT Engineer and along with that you have GitHub Copilot or something similar, then you can prototype something very, very fast. But can you really build an enterprise app and scale it to millions of users? Probably not yet. And again, not yet is the keyword here. It's going in that direction, but it's still not there yet.
Cool, awesome. So there was one thing that you said that I'd like you to go deeper on, which was feature extraction from natural language. Could you just explain that a little clearly? What does that mean?
Sure. So let's say you have a very simple statement saying Varun and Prateek are talking about generative AI on a Zoom call right now. Right now, when you say this, you want to maybe as part of your software, you just want to get the list, the names of the participants who are talking, right? So you can just send a prompt to ChatGPT saying, in this sentence, give me the names of the people who are talking about generative AI, right? Then ChatGPT will just tell you Varun and Prateek, right? And you can ask it to give it to you as a JSON array, which your app can then consume and work with it in whatever possible way, right? And that's the simplest of the examples. Some other things we have built, for example, let's say you have the resume, a CV of a candidate, right? You want to convert that to JSON. Before OpenAI or before any of these, generative AI and language models, it was there were tools, but they were not accurate. There were a lot of regex based tools which would say, acha, okay, there is a technology section, there's a programming languages section in this person's resume, so based on a regex, I'll extract all the programming languages that this person knows, right? But now what we can do is we can say, okay, this is the text in a resume, convert this into a JSON format, and this is the JSON object I want. The shape of the JSON object should be this. So that's essentially what I meant by feature extraction, wherein you can extract certain features within a natural language from a natural language, and process it in any way you want in the apps that you're building.
Understood. And speaking of GPT engineer, there's this amazing video that's going very viral, right? In the past 2-3 days, where this guy goes and he says, "Make me a Python code for the snake game," right? And it just like makes everything, and it looks brilliant, right? Like I think he wrote just one line saying, "Make me code," and it asked 3 or 4 questions. He didn't even reply to those 4 questions. He replied to only one question, and still
only one. Yes.
Yeah. So is this how do I say it? Is this like fraud, or is this just one use case that happened so brilliantly and he ran with it?
Right. So see that, doing the first generation, that is definitely something that is possible, right? Generate a snake game that does this. Now, if what is not possible, and I have tried this, in some cases it works, some cases it doesn't, right? So for what is not possible is make this one change to the game that you generated now, right? That is something where it will not work. And modern software development that we do, it's not like ek bar bana diya, rakh diya, khatam, tata, bye bye, right? You always want to make more changes, and which is where you need a developer. You can scaffold out a first version or whatever it is that you want with something like GPT Engineer, or there's one more good one called Small, I think. So even that is pretty good, right? So there are also people are there's this guy called Varun Maya on his YouTube. Him and Tanmay, but they generate Chrome extensions with Small, right? And these are Chrome extensions that are okay and publishable, right? But then would you have that Chrome extension released, and would you want your users to use it? Maybe not, because they don't really look that good. The user experience that they have is not that great, right? So you would it achieves the core functionality that you want to achieve, but then is it really that usable? Is it really that good? Would a user finally use it? Would a user trust it if you release it? That is something that is kind of, we are still not there yet, right? So the first version, or the MVP, not even the MVP or first version, maybe just a scaffolding is what I would call it, right? It is good to scaffold out something and start from there. Just like when ChatGPT started becoming popular, people were like, it's not that great to just write articles, copy, paste, and publish, but it gives you a good starting point, a skeletal structure of sorts with, okay, this is the shape of my article, or, whatever it is. And then I, as an editor myself, will maybe make certain changes and finally publish it. That's the state it is in right now.
Understood. Anshul asks a very interesting question, which is, by when will it get good enough?
So the speed at which things are going, probably within 1 to 2 years, less than 2 years for sure is what I believe. But again, you never know, right? It could be tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and to go a little deeper, so his question was, why can't you load up the first version of the software into the context and ask it to make edits? Why is that not possible today?
Right. So that is technically possible. Some of these, HAI or programmer repos like GPT Engineer, some of them do it. But then at some point, what happens is your code becomes really, really big, and then loading that entire thing into the limited context window that you have, right? That is something that will not be possible, right? And then you can then say, okay, you can still, there are hacky ways to achieve certain things there. Like, you then break it down into modules and say this module is supposed to do just this, or this microservice is supposed to do just this, and then load just that microservice and things like that. There are ways to do it, but then that would mean you as a human would have to, think a lot, and as in, it's ultimately engineering you're doing, your prompt engineering or doing some other kind of engineering to get it to do work. Right. So ultimately, it's you have to. It's more effort basically for you as a human.
Got it. Understood. So for people who have not coded anything on GPT or Gen AI or LangChain yet, so just a very quick on this point that Anshul raised, right? So there's something called context, which is when you have to first give data to a LLM, to a model, right? Now, how long that input can be is limited based on which LLM you're using, right? So in the case of Chat GPT, for example, it used to be about 4,000 tokens. Now it's become 16,000, right?
16,000.
16,000 also not a lot, right?
Correct.
Reach that limit very, very fast, right? Which is what Varun was saying, that you may not be able to even input your entire code base into an LLM at all. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's go to the next one, which is, what are some of the general use cases that you and your team have worked on? What are some of the common client requests?
Right. So one of the most common requests that we get, which I think, when people think about OpenAI, ChatGPT, generative AI, they think in terms of chatbots only, right? Which is something that I would want people to change. But right now, they think chatbots, and which is why we get a lot of requests for, building chatbots that enable their users to chat with their data. For example, say there is a company that has, some kind of a, product documentation, and, they want a, product help bot, kind of a bot that's embedded as part of their website in the documentation, a helper that can pop up and you can ask any questions, it will help respond, right? So something like that. That is something that is very, very common. There are a couple of, straightforward, content generation use cases also that we have worked on, wherein the app helps apps helps their customers, their users, generate some content and post it on social media and things like that, right? Captioning images, things like that. That is something that is also pretty common. And there are a very few use cases where it is not really a chatbot, but a feature extraction that I mentioned, right? The resume, that is an actual use case that we built, right? So, extracting data out of a resume. So a user can upload a PDF resume and we can convert that into JSON and do anything with it, right? So that is, and, we are doing that with not just resumes, with some other types of data as well, but that's largely, one kind of a use case which we are using generative AI for, right? There is also this entire thing of getting generative AI or ChatGPT to interact with external services. Like, say you want your, like, it's an extension of the chat with your data thing, but instead of chatting with a PDF file or some documentation, you can get it to write an SQL query, execute the SQL query against your database, get the results, summarize the results, and then tell you the answer in a natural language format. That's also something we are doing.
Got it. So would it be fair to say that about 95% of the use cases fall into three buckets? One is data extraction, that you give it a resume, tells you, yes, this guy knows Java, right? The second would be querying your own internal databases, in the sense that this is my
Correct.
SOP, these are my problems, not problems, but this is my internal data that I have. You can now,
Correct.
right? And then the
Correct.
third one would be, I just call it spam for the for the easiness of use, which is that I need to create 3,000 articles talking about how amazing my work
Correct.
is, right? And then they
Correct.
can do it. Okay.
Correct.
Right. What is the most interesting problem that you worked on?
Most interesting problem. So the interacting with external systems has been the most interesting thing. You get a natural language query, and then you build agents, which we can of course dig deeper into if required. But we build agents that can interact with any kind of external system, right? So for example, let's say you have some kind of an API documentation. You can get your LLM to read, understand that API documentation, and make API calls, right? So for example, so that is something that we can do. We are doing something with Jira right now, where you can ask how many story points were completed in the last sprint. It goes, makes an API call to Jira, and it understands the Jira API by itself, makes an API call, gets that detail for us, and does something like that. So use cases like these are more interesting because it can interact with any of the third party, any external third party app, right? So building these agents is what is interesting and challenging.
That's pretty cool, man. What are some of the cases where you've said to a client कि यार ये तो नहीं हो पाएगा?
I had something similar day before yesterday, I think. I spoke to someone who has multiple product ideas, and they were like, they saw GPT engineer, and they're like, okay, let's build a bot that can build enterprise level applications so that I can ensure all my ideas can come to life, right? That person has multiple right. So that is definitely something we said no to, as in it is technically possible, but then it will require a lot of trial and error effort, a lot of things, and it is still going to be it's still not going to be there where you say, okay, this is my idea, build me an app, I build an app, go to investors, raise money, and then sell it off, right? That's definitely not there yet, right? So that is one thing that we have said no to. There are a few use cases which we had said no to earlier, but now I think they are possible. Things like music generation is something that was challenging some time ago. Again, for people like me who do not have any AI or ML background, right? There have been other models that do this, but with simple transformers, with simple models like this, it had not been possible. But now there are more and more things coming up where things like this are possible. So music generation and video generation is something that we had said no to in the past, but now maybe we can explore.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense to say no to the first guy because he was basically asking you to replace Coditas, right? So that's not what happened. Nice. And for the music one, how long ago did you say no?
This was about 4 months ago, I think.
That's pretty fast. So that means in 4 months, it has progressed really, really well.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool, man. Awesome. There are a bunch of questions. So guys, so some of your questions we will leave for later because we may have planned to go deeper into that, right? Some of them we'll take right now. So Mehul asks that what are some of the top of mind use cases in enterprise where Gen AI is 10x better in cost, time, accuracy, etc.
10x better in cost, time, accuracy. So couple of things is, we did a recent proof of concept for a retail chain to help manage their inventory distribution. right? So you can get ChatGPT or GenAI. We use OpenAI APIs for most of almost 99% of it. The remaining 1% is just experimentation for now. We don't, as in, at least it would require a lot of training and all of that to use anything other than that. But sorry, coming back to the question. So one very good enterprise use case is helping a retail chain plan their inventory distribution based on sales across different stores that they had across the city, right? So we give it access to data. So the way this happens is we use a framework called LangChain, and we'll probably talk more about LangChain in some time. But we get LangChain to load a pandas data frame. Pandas is a Python library that data scientists use, and then using that data frame, you can get OpenAI to derive a lot of insights, apply some formulas, apply some calculation, and then finally come up with certain recommendations. Right. So that is one use case where it's very easy to build this out very fast. And although it is a problem that's probably solved earlier by a lot of other data scientists, there are a lot of available algorithms you can use to do this. But again, we tried it with generative AI and got kind of similar results. That is one. Another one. Let me see, which one can I? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, e-commerce. So e-commerce is a pretty good use case. Product recommendations is something that we can very easily build with generative AI. Also, image search is something that's very easily achievable now with generative AI. Although so generative AI is not just text, right? So it's based on this concept called transformers, right? So you can do image transformers, video transformers, text transformers, things like that. So you can actually do image transformers, and when you search for blue jeans, it'll actually show you images of blue jeans that you have in your inventory, and you can index your images that way, right? So that is something that you can do. So if you do a combination of what the image describes, but plus the title of or the description of your product, you can get much better search in e-commerce. So that is again, really good way to do better search for, e-commerce with OpenAI or generative AI.
Perfect. After this, there are a bunch of very technical questions, which I think is great because we can go into the next part, right? So guys, so for anything that we have to discuss about how to build stuff in Gen AI, right? We need to be a little bit technical, right? Because we don't want this to be a section where we just हवा में बात करके बोलते हैं कि हाँ भाई बहुत आसान है हो जाएगा, right? We want you to understand a little bit so that when after this session, you can go back to your team and say कि भाई देखो अब मुझे भी पता है, right? So Varun, I'll leave it up to you to take us deeper on this.
Sure. Sorry, deeper on what?
On the technical aspects, LangChain, etc.
Understood. Okay, so let me maybe spend a few minutes talking just about LangChain, right? So LangChain is a framework that has been that started couple of months ago, and they are a framework that lets you build apps on top of LLMs, right? They make it very, very easy to build apps on top of LLMs. Even without LangChain, you can build apps, but LangChain provides a lot of tooling, a lot of internal tooling that lets you, that makes it a lot easier to do a lot of very, very, very normal stuff, right? For example, a very simple thing is managing your prompts, right? So anything that you do with LLM, it has to start with some kind of a prompting, right? So the prompting could be something like, you are a helpful assistant who can help me do this, right? And then maybe your app does 4 different things, so you want to manage 4 different prompts. You want to plug in the user input in certain places in the prompt so that it makes it easier. So LangChain has this thing called prompt templates that makes it a lot easier for you to manage and all your prompts and query LLMs in a much easier way. LangChain also lets you, build agents, which is what I was talking about some time ago. Like, it has a lot of pre-built agents, like your SQL agent, your MongoDB agent, and it has a Wikipedia agent, it has a Google search agent, it has a couple of agents that it has inbuilt. And you can say, so the prompt goes something like, you are a helpful assistant who can answer the given question based on the tools that are available to you. And then you give a list of tools. Tool number one is the Google search tool, and this helps you to do a Google search and get some data. Tool number two is a Wikipedia tool. This helps you to search Wikipedia to get certain details about it. Tool number three is something else. Based on this thing, answer this question. So LangChain then change your prompts one by one, right? So if you ask it a question like which city or which state is the current president of India from, as a language model, your chat GPT, OpenAI's chat GPT does not know who the president of India is as well, right? So then it says, okay, so to do this, first I need to know who the president of India is. So it does a Google search or a Wikipedia search. It decides that it needs a Wikipedia tool or a Google search tool to do this. So it first goes and goes to Wikipedia or goes to Google and does a search for who is the president of India. It gets the name of the president of India, Draupadi Murmu. Then it says, okay, now I know the name of the president of India. Now I need to find out where they are from. Then it does a Google search for where Draupadi Murmu is from. And then it says, okay, Odisha. I now know the final answer. The current president of India is Draupadi Murmu, and she is from Odisha. Right. So this is the chain. That's why it's called LangChain. So it can chain prompts one by one. It queries OpenAI multiple times. Based on the response, it goes to your agents, your tools. Agents are what basically run your tools. So your agents, you can create an agent that has access to these tools. We created an agent. It went to Wikipedia, got the details from Wikipedia, then asked your OpenAI to summarize it. Once that happens, then it goes back to, it says, okay, based on this summary from paragraph from Wikipedia, I know this is the person. Then again, it does a Google search again, gets some more details from Google search, summarizes it, finally gives you a natural language answer. So that is what LangChain is. This might still, I don't know if I was able to explain it clearly. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to help you with or answer any of the questions that you have on this.
Yeah, guys, LangChain is complex, right? And please feel free to ask us questions, right? We will also give you a lot of examples, right? To help this sort of methodology get really concretified in your head, right? So please keep asking us questions, right? Effectively, where your chat GPT says, as a large language model, I cannot is where an agent will be able to come in and do something, right? As an example, right? So one of the examples that we had talked about, right? There's a very simple tool that you can build called WikiGPT, right? It takes about 30 minutes of coding. That's it, right? That is how easy LangChain makes life, right? Now, what Wikipedia, now, for example, right? If you ask Chat GPT about 2-3 months ago, that who won the last Formula One Grand Prix, right? Chat GPT will say, boss, I don't know because I have number one data only till 2021, right? So now, which means that you need to plug in some way for it to query new data, which means that you would plug in either Wikipedia access to it, which would be the Wikipedia agent, or Google search access to it, which would be the Google agent, right? You plug in these two, then suddenly your your Wiki GPT is able to do all these things that Chat GPT could not do before, right? There was also another very interesting set of use cases that used to come up, which was that it would get basic math problems wrong, right? The way to solve this using LangChain was that there was a model called LLM-math, right? Which was purposely built only to solve math problems, right? So you could now take, for example, your Wiki GPT, say, okay, fine, look, tell me who was the person who came first in the last Formula One Grand Prix find me their year of birth, right? So first LangChain will say, okay, look, who won the Formula One Grand Prix? I know what Formula One is. I don't know who won it. So first, let me go and ask Wiki who won it. It would say, okay, Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has not won anything in a long time. Max Verstappen won the last Grand Prix, right? Then it would say, all right, fine. Now I need to find his birth year. Let me go to Wiki again, find his birth year. It would say, okay, fine, 1997. And then you would say, okay, fine, now square Max Verstappen's birth year, right? So now it would say, okay, 1997 times, sorry, squared. For that, ChatGPT can't do it. I have to go to LLM Math and it would do this. So this is something which about 6 months ago was very difficult to do, right? And most of the times you would see there were a lot of guys who were prompt engineers who were sitting and just doing this, right? Here, I have to make 4 different prompts and let me make those 4 different prompts. Let me run them and I'll give you the result, right? Now, LangChain allows you to do all that much easier. I hope that's clear. I hope that's not too complicated, right? If it is, please do ask, right? Because Varun and Mohak, they're both experts on this, and they'll be able to take us a lot deeper than what we've gone through. Okay. Anshul asks again, what does it automatically figure out the next agent? Varun?
Yes, it does. It does. So it's as simple as the way this works. Like I told you, right? The first prompt that you tell it is, you have access to these 4 tools, right? Now, based on this, you answer this question, right? So as a large language model, it is able to say, okay, first I need to use the Wikipedia tool. I got this answer. But now to answer this next one, I will probably use the, this next tool, right? And something like that, right? So it is able to figure out which tool to use. Sometimes, for example, if you do Wikipedia and Google search both, you might think it would choose Google search, but it goes to Wikipedia, right? Because it can get similar answers in both, right? So you, as a person who's building it, you have to be careful about the list of tools you give to it, right? You can't say, okay, sare tools, keep all the tools and then do it. Then it sometimes is not able to very clearly differentiate between which tool to use. But largely 90% of the time, if you are careful about which tools you give it access to, then yes, it definitely can do that.
All right. By the way, Mohak, I'm sorry I've not introduced you yet, but feel free to jump in while we are doing these questions also, right? We'll get to your proper intro later on, all right?
Yeah.
Then there was another question. Is it possible to use LLM to search through my folders, which include docs, Excels, and PPTs, especially Excels and PPTs? Okay, so banking and consultancy use cases, understood. To extract data, what would be a good approach for this?
Yes, so definitely you can. So this is this is essentially chat with data kind of a thing, right? So LangChain has a Excel parser and a Microsoft Word parser. I'm not sure about PPTs, but I think that's doable, right? So it is possible. Your first question, yes, it is possible. Search through folders, decide a doc, Excel, PPTs. That is also possible. So if you wanted to, first decide which document I have to check, and then within that document search for the answer and give you a result, you would have to spend some time, writing code. It's not a, like Pratik said, it's not a half a day's work. It's probably a little more than that because you need to tweak it a bit. It is still possible. But the way you would go about it is you would, if you do not want it to search your directory straight away and you want to index all of that and have an index of all of this ready, saying, this document has details about this document has details about this. Now you go ahead and, and then load all documents in an index database somewhere and then finally go to ask those questions, then yes, it is possible. So the way chat with data generally works is, you have your data, right? Especially if it is static data. If it's something like a database, Excel sheet is debatable if it keeps changing or if it is, fixed EA Excel sheet. But let's assume it's always fixed, right? So if it's a fixed data set, you basically index it, you create embeddings out of it and store it into something called a vector DB. So basically you break it down into chunks, vectorize it and store it into a vector DB. When a user asks a question, you do a similarity search against the vector DB and get documents that are similar to what the user has asked from your vector DB. You can get the top K documents. It could be 5, it could be 7, it could be 10. Then you pass that as the context to your LLM. So you say, based on this data given below, and this data would be similarity search ka results that we have. Based on this data given below, answer the question asked by the user, right? And then the question, and then finally, any LLM would be able to answer that in general. Right? That's how it works. So you can use the same concept to do the search in docs and Excels and PPT files for sure.
Cool. So let's make a very quick scoping or a MVP of what this would look like, right? So I'll be the noob intern, right? You tell me where I'm going wrong. Okay. So first thing I would do is I would sit down and I would say, let's put a real example. Let's say I'm a school administrator, right? I have 10 classes with 40 students each. Each of those students has one report card in an Excel and one Word document with their teachers' reviews, for example, right? So now I need to do exactly what Ashwin had asked, right? Which is that someone will come and say, "Hey, can you give me the performance report of Varun, who is in class 9, right?" So first, somehow I have to teach the LLM that, look, class 9 data is in folder class 9 data. Is that correct?
Correct. So one good way of doing this would be to build a LangChain agent, a custom agent that would essentially, just like we had a Wikipedia agent or a Google search agent, you could have your own, school agent or whatever, right? And you write a proper description for it. But sorry, go on.
Understood. No, this is exactly what we need. So
right.
First I build an agent that says, okay, chalo, if the prompt says class 9, then all class 9 data is in this folder, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I feed that as an agent to my LangChain. Correct.
Correct.
Then it has to somehow be able to read the Excel and read the doc. So I need a Excel parsing agent and a doc parsing agent. Correct?
Correct. Correct.
Plug these two also into LangChain. So now my LangChain has 3 agents. Correct?
Correct. Right. This actually might not be the right way. Like, we can, instead of doing a class 9 agent, like you said, we can also just do with the Excel agent and say all data is present in this Excel sheet.
Got it.
Right. Even that is something that is possible. Or this list of Excel sheets and you give parts of all the Excel sheets. Even Excel agent right now, whatever is there with LangChain, that is also possible.
Understood.
You pass it a list of files and it can read through those files basically.
Makes sense. Then you mentioned vector embeddings, which is actually the coolest thing I've read this entire year, right?
Right.
So would you mind just telling our good folks here about what are vector embeddings and how does that work?
Sure. So, so a vector embedding, at least, my understanding of it, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows it. So a vector or an embedding is basically a vector representation of your natural language sentence, right? So let's say there is this paragraph that says, let's take that, say, or a sentence that says, Varun and Pratik are talking about generative AI on a Zoom call right now, right? So this entire sentence can be converted into a vector basically, right? So
so when you say, sorry, when you say vector, is this similar to when we were in class 11, 12, we were taught vectors and scalars and how far two vectors are from each other?
Exactly. It is exactly that. But these are vectors with multiple dimensions, right? In class 2, class 3, we saw that, for example, a speed as a vector has two dimensions, acceleration has 3 dimensions and things like that. So here a vector would have a few thousand dimensions, right? And these vectors would basically, if it's an English language statement, right, it would be a vector that represents English language characteristics. So for example, something like a man and a king would be close to each other as vectors, right? A king and a queen would be close to each other as vectors, but a king and a woman would probably be far as vectors, right? They would not be as close, right? So that is how vectors generally work. Now these are just single dimensional, king, queen, man, woman. These are single dimensional, right? And then if you you can then vectorize statements. This vectorization is also done by your transformers which run your large language models only, right? So when you want to use OpenAI to query your data, you have to use OpenAI APIs to vectorize your data. In OpenAI terms, these are called embeddings, right? So you create embeddings, right? Now for these vectors, you can store these vectors into a specific kind of a database. That's a vector database. But before I get into that, are vectors clear?
Guys, are vectors clear?
It's essentially a numeric representation of an English language statement.
Yeah. It's basically a way for us to, for a computer to figure out, given two statements, how likely are they to be close enough to each other?
Close enough. Correct.
Like, for example, if I say Mahendra Singh Dhoni is a great cricket player, and then I say Max Verstappen won the last Grand Prix, it knows that it is close in the dimension of sports, but it is really far in the dimension of who are we talking about, right?
Correct. Correct.
So that is how these LLMs figure out, okay, let's go back to our school administrator example, right? If I'm asking it for a science score versus I'm asking it for an English score, it knows that, okay, this score and this score is two different places. Their vector values are too far apart from each other. So I should not look for the science score in the English score model.
English score.
Okay, Kunal asks, so does a statement get mapped to one vector or a statement maps to a list of vectors?
Right. So that's up to us. So when you are creating vectors or creating embeddings, right, you can chunk your documents in specific ways, right? So you can decide to create a vector out of a paragraph, out of a page, out of a single statement, or anything like that, right? So that is dependent on how your data is distributed in your document. And then you have to, play around with it to understand what is the best way to go about it. Right. One general way is, especially in wherever we do chat with documentation kind of thing, we take a title and everything that's below the title, including all the subtitles. One title forms one document and we create a vector out of it. Right. That's one approach that we've taken. But if you are, maybe creating a vector out of a Harry Potter book, right, then you probably should, I don't know, maybe take a paragraph and create one vector for one paragraph kind of a thing.
Yeah. So guys, one more reason why do we even need vectors, right? Is that a lot of times these LLMs say that, listen, I will not take any context that is bigger than X number of tokens, right?
Correct.
So even if you input the whole Harry Potter book, you'll be like, boss, मुझसे नहीं हो पाएगा, right? So then you say, ठीक है भाई, चलो आप ये पूरी book मत लो, आप ना ये 1000 pages ले लो. So one page, each of those is one vector, right? So then it becomes slightly easier. But I might be completely wrong. I'm civil engineering. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
That's what it is, right? So the reason we break it down into chunks is exactly what you said, Pratik, is the context window is small. It's limited to maybe 2,000 tokens, 4,000 tokens, and now 16,000 tokens. But 16,000 tokens is also still small, right? It can probably load a 50-page book, probably, not more than that, right? So entire Harry Potter ka book definitely nahi ho payega. But it can still take maybe 50 pages from Harry Potter, right? So what we do is coming to the next part of completing what we spoke about. So once you create vectors, you store it in a vector database, and then whenever a person asks, whenever a user asks, like any question, agar Harry Potter ka example lena hai, then what spell is used to make things float in Harry Potter, right? So then it basically will do a similarity search for this particular statement. So the way it works is all our vectors were stored in a vector database, right? Now you create your whatever question was asked, you create a vector out of this question and do a similarity search, right? So now when you do a similarity search, all vector databases have this way to query, such that you can do a similarity query and you can get the top N or top K documents, right? So you say, okay, get me top 5 similar documents which are the most similar to this question I have asked, right? So it gets those 4 paragraphs, 4 pages, 4 chapters, whatever it is, which talks about spells that make things float, right? Then you prompt your LLM that, based on this information given below, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, tell me what are the spells that can make things float. Then of course it can tell you, right? So this is called retrieval augmentation, or in terms of machine learning, or the LLMs in general, it's called retrieval augmentation. So you're basically augmenting the retrieval that the LLM does by augmenting it with a different source, basically.
Perfect. So in your example of, so we took the Harry Potter book, we chunked it into 1,000 pages, then we said, give me the spell that makes things float. Then it goes to all of those, it figures out, kya, chalo, there are 4 pages in which someone shouts something and then things float. In 3 of those pages, he says Wingardium Leviosa, and one of them, the guy says Accio, right?
Correct.
So then it shows back to us saying that, okay, look, here are the 4 pages. 3 is Wingardium Leviosa, 1 is Accio. Now you can decide which you want to use, right?
Correct.
Right. Cool. Anshul asks, what is the best practice for vectorizing or embedding a business document with titles, subtitles, and what tools do you use?
Okay, so creating and embedding is just an API call to OpenAI. So there are, LangChain provides a function that does it for you, or if you're using OpenAI APIs directly, you can do that. Best practice is, it depends on the kind of document you have. Generally, what we do is we parse it in such a way that we either pick chapters, or you pick certain title and everything below that title, right? And then create vectors out of it, right? So the way this changes is, if you say you create vectors out of chapters completely, right? Each chapter becomes a vector, right? In that case, the number of documents in your similarity search that you take would have to be lesser, because you have to fit 4 chapters in your context window, right? But if you vectorize just paragraphs, each paragraph in your document into a vector, then you can say top 20 ka similarity search, and then you can put all those 20 paragraphs as the context for your LLM to give you an answer. Right now, this completely depends on how your document is structured, right? It will change from document to document. There isn't a single answer saying this will work for all documents, right? This is something you'll have to play around with. You'll have to fine tune and see what works well for your document, right? If it is a document where, even in a single chapter, you are talking about 10 different concepts in some way or the other, then it would be better if you do a paragraph based chunking and, you vectorize each paragraph. But if it is a document where in each page or in each chapter, you are talking about just one topic and you're not, talking about 100 different things, then probably just, creating a vector of the entire chapter would probably make sense. And this is something that you can do with fine tuning. It doesn't take a lot of time. Creating vectors for a 1,000-page PDF would probably take 5 minutes. Like, if you have written the code, for the code to actually execute and finally give out a result and store those vectors in a vector database would take somewhere around 5 to 10 minutes at most, right? So it doesn't take that long. So you can experiment with it very easily, right? You have also asked about tools that we use, right? So one is, LangChain for sure is something that I would recommend. You can also do it without LangChain, just directly make a call to the OpenAI APIs, but LangChain makes it easier. And to store the vectors, there are a lot of popular vector databases. We use Postgres. With Postgres, there is a plugin called PG Vector. So you just add PG Vector as a plugin, and we use Postgres in general. But there is a popular SaaS product called Pinecone, which provides a vector database. And Pinecone is something that a lot of people use. But then it's kind of pay as you go kind of a model with Pinecone. So you can also explore that. Other than that, there are also a lot of in-memory databases. You just install it locally, and then it's before your code starts, you load it into memory and then use it. There are things like ChromaDB or FAISS and a lot of other vector databases, right? But we personally prefer Postgres. It has been working really well for us.
Cool.
Elasticsearch also can store. Sorry, Elasticsearch is also one option you can use.
Shilpa asked a question that blew my mind for a very long time, which was, if it is limited to say 50 pages from a book at a time, how does ChatGPT currently search the whole data that it is trained on? Because we've been told that, oh, billions and trillions and God knows how many gazillions of data points it's been trained on. How does it search everything and give us the answer?
So ChatGPT, I didn't understand that question correctly. So ChatGPT will not search your book, right? That's a given. I think that's understood, right? To search.
I think we can just replace ChatGPT with LLM. So
understood. Any LLM will also not search your book, right? The searching is happening in the vector database. And then based on some context you give, it is giving an answer. But if you are asking like, how has ChatGPT or any LLM indexed so much data and it has so much knowledge already, that is what transformers are, right? That is what, made this entire ChatGPT and all of these LLMs possible. That is why we are living in the boom that's happening right now around the LLM world, right? So the key there is, there was this paper from Google called "Attention is Everything," and and that is what started everything, right? This entire funda of transformers and how transformers work, and the way it generally works is it does the next word prediction, right? It does not actually say, okay, I'll just answer it in one shot. Like even when you are speaking, when I'm speaking right now, I do not know what the words are going to be, right? It just, I am always thinking about, acha, next word ye hoga, next word ye hoga, next word ye hoga. That is how transformers are also, built in. And then there are two ways, like, instead of going this way, it also goes reverse. It's basically a big neural network with weights. It decides, okay, the next word that's the highest probable word based on this past data is this, then the next word is this, then the next word is this, right? And I'm not an expert on this, right? So I'm not sure if I was able to give you good enough information on that, but this is my understanding of it.
Varun over here is answering all the questions like an expert, but then also adding that he's not an expert.
I'm sorry.
All right. So actually, what Shilpa, if I may just add something in there, what Shilpa asked is a very basic doubt which everyone had at some point of time. Every one of us, when we started talking and learning about the field, that's a very general thought. Ki how can it go through all the words and then recover an information? So I mean, just to explain it in a very vague way. So whatever query you are putting in, whatever you're asking the GPT or any LLM, so it just first of all understands that, gathers the context out of it. So and then it will only look into it will actually try to understand the features and patterns of what you've asked about. So it will just it has already been trained of all of that data, so it will only gather information and generate some content based on that specific features and patterns that you've asked the information about.
Cool, man. That's perfect. So Mohak, why don't you give us a quick intro about yourself, about what Langify does, how did you guys end up using it, what were the issues that you faced, etc.
Sure, thanks, Vati. All right, so I am a graduate of 2020 batch, and as actually Pratik also pointed out, most of us are not doing the work that we have learned in, what degree we have through our college. I'm an electrical engineer, Pratik is a civil engineer. All of us eventually, lead where our minds wants us to, and whatever our likings are. So I have ended up doing ML and AI programming, even though I didn't have much knowledge about it, like in 3 years from 3 years before today. So, but yeah, the technological advancements have given us the capability of learning things quickly, and then just if you have an idea, just apply it and then create a product out of it. Of course, if you have that I mean, if your vision is like that, you want to build a product and sell it. So, all the technologies is here. The technology is here to help you out with all of that. And yeah, so about Langify, Langify actually, when we started back in 2020 and 2021 during the COVID lockdown period, our intention behind building Langify was to create a model that will be able to understand speech. Right. So I'm not talking about converting speech to text. That has already been done. Google has been doing it since many decades, and people have mastered that, Microsoft, IBM, but rather understanding what mistakes are you making in speech and how can you correct those. So this was the initial idea, where we wanted to help out school students, uh, with the mistakes that they were making in speech, right? So for that, of course, there are certain modules in place. First of all, you have to use a ASR model to convert speech into text, and uh, then after that, to understand the text, the context behind the text, that is a separate other field I will talk about later on. But yeah, just the speech part, to understand what particular feature you are looking out for, like fluency, vocabulary, and the delivery of the pitch, tonality of what you're speaking, how you're speaking, how many pauses you're taking, what are those rates, and how is the correct way of saying those. So that is what we started with. After that, we built a use case on top of it, where now currently what we are doing is we are enabling upskilling and tech industries, mostly in uh, educational institutes, to help out with one-on-one mentoring for their students. So of course, understanding communication is one part, and then comes the understanding of context of what the students are learning through these courses, through what the teachers have been teaching, and what is the retention rate of the student, what all concepts the students learned. And so that we are doing by question answering sort of assessments, where the model or the application is asking a student some questions based on a topic, and the student simply answering. So you can think of it like a Jarvis model, but specifically for a tech industry. That is where we strive to get to, where we can enable thousands of students to directly interact with a AI, or with an application, and then it should be able to resolve your queries, your doubts, and pinpoint where exactly the student needs to improve on, and how can they improve on, what should be the learning plan be. So we're enabling those businesses with such personalized feedback and personalized learning plans for their students. And the input is again verbal assessment. So if you're teaching, let's say, SQL in a data analytics course, you simply post an assignment on Langify, and the Langify AI generates an assessment for them. The students simply answer some questions, and in the end, they receive feedback about their communication skills, and as well as the content. So as well as the context of whatever they've said. So just to give you an example, so a question could be, how do you decrease the loading time of a website? So it's a subjective question. Everyone has their own individual answers. So before generative AI, what we were doing with BERT was just trying to understand the context behind some sample answers for that particular question. Now we know the field to which question this belongs to. It belongs to development, software development. So we were just looking at how do you answer a certain question like that, and then what are all the things that are required to give explain such a question. So to explain such a question, you basically need to first of all list out all the possibilities that are there to improve with the loading time of a website. But if there was a context in the question, so let's say, how do you improve the loading time of website, which is essentially an e-commerce platform. So e-commerce would mean there are a lot of pictures in there. So then what Langify AI does is it also helps the students with specific personalized ideal answers. कि अगर आपका कॉन्टेक्स्ट ये था तो आप ये वाली चीजें इंक्लूड कर सकते थे, तो आप इमेज रिलेटेड पॉइंट्स ज्यादा बताओ rather than just giving a broad answer. So that is essentially what we are doing right now.
Understood. So if I could just go a little bit deeper on that example that you mentioned, right? So if you if the question is how do you improve the landing time or the loading time of a website, right? Before using generative AI, right? If I was the one giving the answer and I was like, हाँ मतलब ये भी कर सकते हैं शायद वो भी हो जाएगा, you would be able to tell me yeah you're not confident, be more confident, right?
Yeah.
Now you can also tell me you're not confident and you should talk about these 4 things.
Exactly. So that's what we have brought into the picture using generative AI. In the past 4-5 months of development time, we have we have added features where the students are, of course, getting those sample answers. So those are being generated in real time. So these are the ways a particular student would answer, or a particular fresher level or a mid-senior level person would answer such a question, so that they can do from there. And subjective explanation is always great. I mean, this is something we have learned over the last 1 year when we actually started building the product. Where so at first, as I told you, we have had built a speech analysis AI, which was just able to generate a lot of data, like technical data, in terms of whatever was your mean length of run, which is essentially how many words you can speak before taking a pause, or before uh, uh, jumping onto the next phrase or something. So understanding those kinds of, we can't just directly put out data that we are generating, but rather we have to put it in some words. And what's better to use to put out subjective explanation than generative AI, which is able to just take data points and then able to explain to a student in their own language कि हाँ भाई आप ये वाला चीज mention किया, but you can go more deep into it, you can add examples into it, and then communication wise you can do this to improve your fluency. You can you can try to use less, you can use less filler words and replace them with pauses. And with pauses, what happens is, I mean, stuff like that. So it just explains, uses the data points that Langify core technology was already evaluating, and then it is, we are using the generative AI to just put those everything into words.
Got it. Understood. So if I was to basically split the development of the project, right? I know it doesn't work like that, but just let's take a hyper idealized world कि एक दिन पूरा पुराना Langify है बन गया, right?
हाँ.
And then उसके बाद से you guys said चलो भाई now we will integrate Gen AI on top of this. So
Yeah.
first is how much time did that integration take, and how many people did it take? What was the process like?
All right. So first of all, to categorize, what we have essentially done is we have optimized the already the features that we already had, and we are just adding on features which brings convenience for the end user. So our end user is, I mean, we are selling it to businesses, but the end users are students. So we are trying to integrate and bring in features that will bring convenience for, I mean, these end users, convenience in generating the assessment, in pushing assignments, generating mock interviews, and at the student ends to generating explanations of the feedback, and showing them more data to help them improve their own answers. Right? So Langify actually works with a team of size 12 people, and there are 3 developers, 3 full-time developers, and the rest of them are interns. Yeah.
Wow, that's fucking amazing, dude.
And that's why we are able to operate from Bhopal. So that is what we were talking about yesterday. And I mean, the overall the development time was around 3 months, most of which was spent into prompt engineering and finalizations of stuff that won't break. So using prompt engineering, you have to be very careful about something that should not break in the future. Yeah, that's what
I'm actually amazed, dude. That's very fast for a pretty, I would say, pivotal change in the direction of your product, right? And I think that is one of the things that that makes life like. Acha, chalo. On that point, how do you determine the success of this feature? How do you know it's actually working, or it's good, or it's useful, or when do you know कि चलो अब हो गया अब इसको छोड़ दो?
all right. So on a from a very broader point of view, I would say if you're losing customers, if you're not, if just directly talk to the end users, talk to the people who are using it on both the customer and in the business end you're serving, and then get feedback from it. That is what we have been doing actually. So the process in Langify is generally what I mean, since we are revolutionizing something, we're trying to replace the traditional MCQ assessments. People are a bit, reserved about it. So what we generally do at Langify is we run pilots with companies. So before starting a full-on program, we always, start with a pilot with a smaller batch, with maybe SMEs or internal team members, and then every time we upload some new features, so we usually have different environments. So we have staging, testing environment, and we ask some pilot clients to test out on those environments, right? And then we understand their experience. We run through the Hotjar analytics. We observe their whole behavior. And I think one-to-one interaction with those people at our scale is possible. Of course, at a much bigger scale, of course, you will have to simply depend on what the data is showing. You can have macro level feedback. So, that's a very basic thing that you can add into your system. And that is something we have also done. We've added micro level feedbacks on every feature that we think will bring a pivotal change in the whole application.
So sounds to me like as if because it's still in the early stages, we actually don't know what the right metrics are. Like when websites launched, when SEO was still new, I don't think people, it must have taken at least 2 months for people to realize bounce rate was a good metric, right? I think we're still there based on what you said. Very interesting. Another thing that I had was that, yeah, if it is so easy to make stuff now, right? तो फिर then who wins in this market, right? क्योंकि सब लोग बना सकते हैं, बहुत जल्दी भी बन रहा है, right? So how does anyone win in this market?
Well, from the business, from business point of view, of course, you have to be fast, but you also have to create a reliable solution which doesn't break. We were talking about this GPT engineer, LLM engineer, which can create applications in itself, but it can't be relied upon because it will break at some or the other point. People are breaking stuff all the time. People are breaking GPTs and using prompt injection, all of that. So safety would be one thing that you need to prioritize, security and safety of the data that you're handling. So using, generally in generative sort of use cases, there's some input, either be text, audio, or image file. People are uploading their personal information, something of that sort. So I think that will become a metric which will help decide people to judge, which product they should go for. So a business who is focusing on all of those things, a business who is focusing on adding, so actually, let me give you an example on that. So before this generative AI applications, what we were doing with BERT, understanding the context, we were limited to certain domains. So earlier we had 15 domains that we could serve. And domains over here means like product management, so profiles, digital marketing, a data analyst, full stack developer, and all. And now that we have generative AI ability in place, we can we have already expanded to actually it's we can expand to any domain that we want in a matter of hours. So scalability is there. So being a business, you should be quite you will be bit you have all the capabilities, and you just need to create a product that serves all and is like serves all, like as I've explained in example, to all the domains that we are able to do now. So that would probably help them in days.
Varun, your thoughts on this?
So what you said is right. Now we are in a state where anyone can build, right? Anyone can release software solutions. So the what I feel is it will shift from kya app banaya, say what problem it is solving. Although it was already focused on, if you look at the Paul Grahams of the world, right? They always talk about what is the problem you're solving, right? Now it will really become that, right? Okay, this is a cool app, but does it really solve a problem, right? And then things that actually solve problems is what is going to have a bigger impact and stay for longer and things like that. Right. In the last probably 4 to 6 months, there are so many products, AI products, right? There is. I'm sorry if I offend anyone here, but everyone is buying a .ai domain, like my product.ai, right? Something named .ai, right? So we have seen a huge influx of those things, and a lot of them are solving good real problems in a much easier way. Things are becoming more accessible. So who wins in the end is probably ultimately us as humans will have some benefit out of this. There's definitely good that will come out of this, and we all will win. Right. Again, that's kind of what I think, where I think it will go. As in, I don't believe in the entire doomsday scenario where AI will take over.
Awesome. There are a few questions that we missed. I just want to go through those really quickly, right? So maybe just to step back a little bit from all the heavy technical stuff, right? Siddharth had asked a question if we can talk about using Gen AI in specific departments at certain companies, like say marketing and product, right? Siddharth, if you're still around, would you want to give us a little bit more context on this? That what kind of company, or is this just a general question that you're asking, where you want to where you would like to brainstorm on this stuff? Siddharth, are you here? I can see him here, but he's not responding. Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, what do you guys think are, let's say, marketing's, product, sales? These three seem to be hopefully the most impactful stuff that can be hit by Gen AI relatively quickly. So what are some of the cool use cases that you've seen here?
So one, very basic use case which we also spoke about is, content generation for marketing, right? If done properly, you can actually get really good content out of generative AI, right? If you use a combination of things like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion and Chat GPT, and you can get a lot of really good content. And content need not always be textual content that you post, right? It could also be, say you want to create a marketing video, so you can get it to write a script for you, right? Content like this, this is where I see that there is going to be a lot of impact, and it has already started, right? So storyboarding a video for the sales/marketing team was very difficult, and now it's a lot easier, right? And this is not even building tools. This is just using Chat GPT directly. There are definitely going to be tools that will come up that will make this process even more easier, faster, better.
Yeah. So what I think over here is, of course, I mean, content generation is something which is an essential part of fields like sales and marketing. But also for a specific sales field, I mean, products like Gong AI have been there in the field for so long, which are able to give feedback to the associate as well as their manager on how they have done, what things they might have missed, some of that stuff. So generative AI is going to just really push that ahead, and then directly, if you just give a context of a client that you want to give a pitch to, so the AI can at least, I mean, I wouldn't say you should rely on the pitch and you directly use everything which the generative AI is generating. Rather, just use it as a first draft and build on top of it. Because as a human, you're much more powerful than a LLM.
For now.
So, yeah.
But I did one thing that I found pretty interesting, right? I fed a bunch of campaigns that had worked, like marketing campaigns that had worked, and I also fed a bunch of marketing campaigns that did not work. And I told it to tell me, why do you think it did not work, and why do you think it worked, and hence tell me what my next campaign should be, right? It did, I would say, analyst to senior analyst level job on that, which is, I would say, pretty good, because analyst seniors are expensive, right? And most of the times they come with their own biases. Here, at least it doesn't seem to be that biased, right? So that was one thing in marketing that I found very useful. Similarly, we were able to do some stuff in product where we basically gave it a bunch of ideas, right? We said that these are my users. This is the persona of my users. Which of these features do you think will work, right? And of course, it gave some junk, right? But in that, the good thing was that it told us exactly what product metrics to focus on to check if it is working. Now, that is something that I think for a product manager who's starting out 2 years in, 3 years in, it's very useful for them to be able to really structure their thoughts, right? May not be as useful when we are 6 years, 10 years into our jobs, but it's definitely very, very useful for the early guys. And my favorite example is an example from the LangChain website, which is their sales GPT, right? So they basically have made an example where um, a sales guy is talking to a client and this GPT is telling it what to pitch next, right? That was brilliant, right? Because that made so many lives easy, I assume, right? If it works properly. Again, going back to what Mohak had said, right? Reliability is a pain, right? Sometimes it works brilliantly and you're like, yaar, ye to maza aa gaya. And then the other thing it'll mess up will be so basic that it does, that problem happens. But that's what I've seen. Then there are a bunch of these sales GPT guys going up now. So yeah. Cool. Siddharth, you also asked, there are a lot of people like me who just knows Chat GPT as an AI tool to experiment. How can we get better at prompting on Chat GPT? There are a bunch of really good YouTube tutorials on this. I'll send them to you later. Just message me, right? Other than Chat GPT, what are some other tools we can explore to make work things efficient? Now, I'll just step in here because there are about 3,000 tools now, right? It's very hard to find what you want. I'll share with you some AI directories where you can go and search that, okay, look, this is my job, this is my profile, this is what I want to do. Give me the tools and it will be able to share that with you. Then Shilpa asks, can you elaborate on how to build a conversational agent around my products, help, reference, code, sample, tutorials, etc. Yeah, guys. This has been asked in one form or the other in our request for questions and 2-3 times in the chat as well. So people really want this. So either build it or tell them how to build it.
What was the question again? Sorry, can you repeat it?
How do I build a conversational agent around my products, help, reference, code, sample, tutorials, etc.?
Right. So this is the most common use case that we get, right? Which I talked about, chat with your data. So you have some documentation and you want your users to be able to ask questions based on that documentation, right? So again, it goes back to the entire, you vectorize it, you store it, and then you query it. It's as simple as that. It's not really that difficult to build unless your data is in multiple different formats. If you have text, if you have images, if you have videos, you have everything, then it might be a little challenging. So, but I'll give you an example, right? So at Coditas we use Angular a lot, right? Angular, the web development framework. Angular keeps releasing newer versions, new features keep coming up. There was this shift in all our developers that instead of doing a Google search, we'll now ask ChatGPT. But ChatGPT was not able to answer anything about the new versions of Angular, right? New features that came up. So we built a Chrome extension, which becomes active when you go to angular.io. We will be releasing it soon, next week probably, where you can ask it a question and then it reads through the Angular doc. We have created a vector database of the Angular documentation because it's open source, it's available, so you're able to do it. And these are all markdown files, MD and MDX files, right? So we are able to create index out of it, and then whenever you ask a question, it is able to answer along with some code examples. It's not just a theoretic, just a paragraph answer, text answer. It is able to answer along with code examples. And now the beautiful thing here is, because ChatGPT or any LLM has a mind of its own, it also creates examples based on the examples that is there in the documentation, which are 95% of the times they are correct. From what we have seen, right? So it can understand what is there in the context you give it, and then answer the question based on the question you have asked. right? Yeah, that's again, it's not very difficult to build, at least right now. 3 months ago it was very new. Now it's not that difficult to build such tools. If you want to build something, just reach out to us. We can build a tool for you within a week and have it ready. And depending on what features you want, it might take more time, but largely it shouldn't take more than 1 person week to index all your data and build a chat interface on top of it.
Yeah. So okay, so Shilpa asked you to share your email address. I'll share it with the entire group. All right.
Yep.
Varun@coditas.com. Ayush said that taking this Angular example, can you also plug in your own code to the new Angular docs? Then ask the GPT to inform highest ROI changes. Okay, interesting.
Yep. This is something we are trying right now. This was the obvious next step, right? So this is something we are trying right now. We are seeing decent results. Still, playing around with things to see, where we can, things like, what's wrong with, why is this not working, or what's wrong with this particular code that I've written, kind of a thing, right? And then it can, depending on the error, it can, chain through multiple things, refer back to the Angular documentation and tell something else. Right, so that is something we are trying right now. But yeah, again, no definitive output yet.
Why do you think it's, very CEO product manager question, abhi tak kyun nahi bana? Like what's
Sorry?
holding it back from, what is the complication at this step in that feature?
So the complication is, code bases in general, right, don't have just one shape. Each code base has a shape of its own. Right now, loading that code base and then making it very generic so that it works across all different types of code bases is where the challenge lies.
Got it. Understood. On that point, there's one thing that I'd want to share in my experience building stuff for this stuff is that you will very quickly be able to build something that solves 60 to 70% of your use cases, right?
Correct.
Going from 70% to 90% will take 1 week, and then 90 to 100% will take 6 months, right?
Correct.
And that is where we are at today, given the way tools have evolved, right? Shilpa also asked, how do I integrate open source alternatives of ChatGPT such as Hugging Face or PyTorch with LangChain? I'll answer that. It's a single line. It's one single command. You can switch out OpenAI. You can use everything else. It's very easy, right? Since there are a lot of guys who have asked this, if you are looking for something that will solve that 60 to 70% of your use cases, reach out to me after this, right? I will share a video with you where a guy takes a PDF, puts it into one chat GPT, and then it's able to answer all of his questions on that. If you want anything beyond that 60%, then reach out to Varun, right? It will take time. It is complicated, which is where I think their expertise lies. Okay, cool. Guys, please keep your questions coming. We will answer them all. Okay, there was one very interesting question, which is, how do you deal with hallucinations in a situation where you cannot be wrong?
Interesting. Mohak, do you want to take that? Because in your product, I think that's something.
Yeah, sure. So if I understand the question correctly, I think this question was specific to edutech applications. It had the word mentioned education in that. So, I would actually like to talk about the problems that we have faced, and usually those that is what I think the question is pointing out to. How do you trust the whatever is being generated, and especially in education field? So you can't tell a student in a Newton's law में ये नहीं होता है Newton's law की every action Newton's law is not कि every motion object will remain in motion until it is acted upon an action force. You have to say it like कि mass is equals to force, force is equals to mass into acceleration. तो वहाँ पे गलत information नहीं दे सकते. So I think to deal with that kind of situations in education field, I think the first solution is, of course, have a very, very robust training data. The data has to be quite high quality, and it has to be verified through, rigorous means. And it should also cover a lot of wide range of topics, and should be, of course, sourced from reliable sources. So I think that would be one place where people fail. So you have to be really careful about what data you are choosing. Then again, fact check and verify the authentication of that through, you can use AI for that as well. And then confidence scores and transparency is another thing, where if you're asking the AI to generate something, also look at the confidence with which it is able to do so. So over here, I would like to again, talk about one thing that we tried out. So Langify core technology was, understanding speech in terms of, fluency, filler, pauses, and etc. So we tried to do that with GPT itself, and every time it gave different results because it does not have a specific rubric in place. So a rubric is a set of instructions through which you can evaluate something, right? So for a UPSC, there is a certain rubric in place, right? So simultaneously for your own applications, you have to also enable add the context of the rubric that it needs to use. कि ये वाली चीज होगी तो इतना rate करना, ये वाली चीज होगी तो इतना. Because if you're just trying to use a generative AI or GPT as a black box, then you won't be able to know कि उसने क्या rules use किए. So whatever information that is generating for you, what basic or baselines it is considering, what threshold value it is considering. अगर आपको वो सब good, bad and okay में बता रहा है तो वो क्या use करके बता रहा है. So that has to be in your control. So that is how you, I think, you can also deal with half-truth problems.
Yep. And I'll also try to do with OpenAI the 0 to 60 that Pratik was talking about, right? So the 0, what Mohak answered is the 60 to 90 wala problem, right? You train your own model with your training data and have confidence scores and all that. But the 0 to 60 way is when you use the OpenAI API, especially if you're using OpenAI ChatGPT here and not using any other custom model, there are two ways to very simple ways to do this. One is they have this parameter called temperature, right, which you can set. So the temperature basically defines how creative your model can get, right? So if your temperature is 0, if you set your temperature as 0, if it's the lowest possible temperature, then the chances of getting the same output every time for that query that you give is very high, right? It doesn't get creative. It says, okay, this data, this is the answer, this data, this is the answer, right? But then if you set your temperature to 1, it varies between 0 to 1. You can do 0, 0, 0 0.1, 0 0.2, 0 0.9, and 1. Right? If it is 1, then it becomes very creative. It then puts in whatever it thinks is right? Like Mohak just said, it might say that there are 5 laws of motion that Newton gave, not just 3. Right? That's something that it will do if you set the temperature of your OpenAI model to 0.9 or 1. Right? So that is one. Second is again, these are 0 to 60 wala answers, right? So the second way is context. Give it more context to be able to answer your questions, right? So that's basically it. Set the temperature to 0, give it more context, then 99% of the times you will get the answer that you're looking for. It will not hallucinate.
Nice. I hope that answers who asked this question? Rahul's question. Okay. We'll just take a couple more since I know that we are already overflowing. So what's the fastest framework and deployment choice for testing and prototyping?
Cool. So I think you should start prototyping with ChatGPT to start with, because ultimately whatever you would want to build, it will involve a lot of prompting, right? So any kind of prompt engineering you do, if you start doing that with ChatGPT, that would be the fastest way for you to see if this is even possible. Can an LLM even do this, right? So that is the way for you to build a proof of concept in some way or the other, saying, okay, through prompting, this is the kind of prompt I'll give, and I'll be able to achieve this, right? Then once you are clear with that, then you go on to the next step wherein you actually start to code it, right? And for coding, you can use frameworks like LangChain. There are others like LangChain which are not that popular, but you can explore those. But I would recommend LangChain and Python, because that's the easiest to get started with, and a lot of help available online.
Just to add something over here, I mean, that is what we discovered from making mistakes. So GPT and I mean other applications, other APIs also have different behavior with their own applications. So GPT is using different set of sources to other than the ones which it is supplying through the API calls and all. So even if you are trying something and it is being successful on the playground that is offered, it is not going to work. There is a probability, there is a possibility that it is not going to work exactly like the same when you are actually sending out API calls. So do have a testing system of your own. I mean, create a testing platform where you're sending hundreds of test cases, and it is resulting. I mean, whatever the results are there, it is almost. We have always observed that the behavior is different than it's not consistent than what it shows on GPT or even its playground. So just be careful of that.
Cool. Shilpa had a question. Shilpa, could you unmute and ask the question yourself? It's pretty loaded. I'm not sure if I'll do justice to it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So my question is around the applications, the testing of applications. How do I generate test data, including boundary conditions? And, it has to be a meaningful test data. Is it possible to do that using LLMs and LangChain?
People have done that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the next question was like, generating test data for unit test cases is fine, but for integration test scripts, I'll need to, usually what I do is what, anyone does is that you record your integration test case by running the screen yourself. But without doing that, is it possible to generate those test scripts for a particular tool, say Cypress or, any other test automation platform?
So if you want to generate code that will run your tests, then it is possible. There are a few tools that are already doing that. I've forgotten the name. I'll share the name, after this meeting with Pratik, and he can share it with the group maybe. But yeah, so there are a couple of tools that people have already built where you go to a website, you record your actions, and then it generates the Cypress code for it. Or there are also tools where you just give it English description saying, log in with this username, password on this website, and it creates an entire test suite for the login module of your app, right? And login being the easiest or the simplest module, but they have more examples on their site. I'll share that with you, right? So that is definitely possible. Test data generation, it's, I think, if you are very clear on what is the kind of test data you want, and what's the input, what's the expected output, if you prompt it correctly, I think you'll be able to. If it's simple, then I think you'll be able to generate it in ChatGPT.
Okay, thanks.
Right. I just have. Sorry, Ken. Can you go on mute, please? Yeah. Okay. So in my list, there's just one more question unanswered, right? So guys, if you have any more questions, please dump them in the chat right now, right? Otherwise, we'll take one more and we'll end this session. So the question is that if generative AI goes berserk, can we shut it off? I'll let either of you take this.
I think a funny way to answer would be just ask itself to
yeah.
shut down. Generate a code that lets me shut down a rogue generative AI.
Yeah, that's one way to go about it. So I don't know. Again, like I said, I don't believe it is going to go rogue right now, at least. I don't know.
I
in the
think it's
future,
more of a
maybe.
meme right now than, I mean,
Correct.
based on some movies.
Correct.
So it won't happen because, I mean, in the end, control, we have made the LLM and it will only do, or it could maybe go wrong. Let's keep that open-ended.
So what I very strongly feel is that most of the people who are making a lot of noise about AI going rogue have not coded with AI yet, right? Once they start, they'll realize that yaar ye nahi chalta, right? And
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah, it's always under control.
yeah, there's
Mostly
a
how we have
lot of
developed
stuff
it.
to be done there. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool, guys. Thank you so much, Varun and Mohak, for this session. It's been very insightful for me, hopefully for the rest of the guys as well. I will be reaching out to both of you with a lot of questions over the next few months, right, as I go down this journey myself. And thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Pratik.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks, Mark,
moderating
and
this.
thanks,
And
everyone. Yeah.
So much.
Thanks a
thanks
lot,
everyone
guys.
who has stayed till now. And just actually, Siddharth wanted some resource, and I'm sure Pratik is going to share a lot of videos on that. One thing I've shared on the chat is for specifically for developers. So I think everyone must have heard of Andrew NG and his platform deeplearning.ai. So that is one course which my developers and I had asked all my interns to take. It's a simple course made in collaboration with an engineer of OpenAI itself. So Andrew NG and an engineer for OpenAI just in a very simple modules have explained how a developer get started with GPT and in the end just create application chatbots on their own.
Yep. Perfect.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. So I'll share all of these links. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend. Thank you for being a great audience. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.